Sverige. Det har været nævnt nogle gange med allemandsretten. Det er noget, vi rigtig godt kan lide, at svenskerne har åbenbart. Men nu skal vi have besøg af en svensker. Værsgo. Og det er Falkvinge, som er en omdiskuteret person. Hans navn har allerede været, eller hans parti har allerede været nævnt nogle gange, også inden han selv kom til stede, nemlig Piratpartiet, som så dagens lys i 2006, og som har fået sæde i Europaparlamentet 2 pladser helt præcis. Du startede din første virksomhed, da du var bare 16 år gammel. Kunne jeg se, du har været projektleder i Microsoft. Du har allerede rigtig mange år og rigtig meget erfaring bag dig. Hvorfor ophavsretten ligger der så meget på scene, at du ligefrem stifter et parti? Det vil jeg rigtig gerne høre, så værsgo.
Tak. Thanks. I'm going to do this in English, partly because I've been asked to, and partly because I don't want you to try to understand what I'm saying, rather focus on the message. So, the title of this talk is what use do we have for copyright anyway, which I've translated loosely to shelters or windmills. Shelters or windmills. But before I go into this, a brief introduction. I come from a Swedish political party called Piratpartiet. How many in here have heard of that before? Everybody, pretty much everybody. I'm impressed. So I'll just glance through this. We were created 5 years ago, 16,000 members, 17,000 activists. We had just over 7% in the European elections last year. That gave us 2 out of Sweden's 20 seats in the European Parliament. We were by far the largest party for voters under 30 with 75% of those votes. And we are, at our core, a civil liberties movement. Focusing on that, what our core platform is, we're talking about the transparency of and accountability of government. We're talking about the right for individual citizens to keep their privacy shrouded. We're talking about the right to keep postal secrecy of communications. We're talking about freedom of expression, of opinion, that you should be able to express an opinion without fear or retaliation. Freedom to create and invent without permission. And the focus of this particular talk, that the same laws should apply online as well as offline. But first, let's look at how we came here today in a brief history lesson. And this is not going to be one of those boring history lessons from school. Actually, since this is a copyright seminar, I might point out that I may actually use this painting. It was painted during the French Revolution, so it just recently came out of copyright. So, all of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. Which is a quote from where? Anybody? Oh, come on, you should recognize this. Nobody? Okay, you get a big fat F in nerdology. It's from Battlestar Galactica, one of the themes there. So, let's go back to them. 1453, almost 500 years ago. Something happened that rocked medieval Europe to its core, and that was the invention of the printing press. At this point, the Black Plague had just ravaged Europe and shattered social, economic, and political structures. It took 150 years to rebuild Europe, and one of the slowest institutions to recover were the monasteries, since they are so slow on the uptake. They were basically the last to be refilled. So when the printing press arrived, the Catholic Church went on a rampage, because all of a sudden they were no longer in control of what books would be allowed to exist. No longer in control of what books would be allowed to exist. Everybody and their brother could publish anything. How are we going to maintain any kind of semblance of order in society if anybody could say whatever they want? And the Catholic Church used all kinds of arguments as to why the printing press is the worst idea since, well, I guess, non-sliced bread. And one of these key things was that the monasteries weren't replenished yet since the Black Plague, so books were very, very expensive to copy. Remember now, this was a time when you went to monastery and asked to have a book copied. And scribes would copy them by hand, page by page. So the church said, how are the monks going to get paid if the printing press is allowed to go rampage? If printers are allowed to bypass the monks and copy just willy-nilly, how are the monks going to get paid? I'm actually not making this up. And so in 1535, they got the printing press banned in France. This didn't work out very well. There were printing presses all around France's borders who smuggled in pirated books. And I remember printed books were pirated by definition here. And there was basically a huge demand. Jumping to the UK, they took a slightly different approach, seeing the failure of France in banning the printing press. And Queen Mary I, who had seen her father turn all of Britain Protestant so he could divorce her mother, weren't very happy with that particular move, so she wanted Britain to go Catholic again. There's a lot of family stories in this. Anyway, she was nicknamed Bloody Mary because she was quite persistent in her efforts to turn Britain Catholic. She killed about 300 families, usually in a quite violent fashion that I won't go into detail about. But what troubled her was the printing press, because people could distribute political pamphlets and political brochures without any control from the crown. And in this particular environment, political brochures meant, of course, Protestant brochures. So she devised a censorship mechanism, whereas she gave one printing guild an exclusive monopoly for printing in all of the United Kingdom, in exchange for having the crown censor what would be printed. So there was the violence from the crown that would enforce the monopoly, and in return the monopoly, this guild, would just do as the crown said. They wouldn't print anything else. So this was a win-win situation for them and a very much lose for everybody else. The monopoly was put in place on May 4, 1557, and it was called copyright. Queen Mary died on the following year, so she wasn't very successful in making United Kingdom a Catholic country again. However, this mechanism is still around. It expired on two particular occasions. The first was a power struggle between Parliament and Crown. The second was when the copyright mechanism actually expired. It was very interesting to see what happened then, because there was a boom of creativity. There was plagiarism all over. There was inverse plagiarism, that you wrote something and put a famous author's name under it to get it more spread. Like Leonardo da Vinci once said that the messenger is the medium. Actually, he didn't say that, I just made that up, but it kind of illustrates the point, doesn't it? So this lasted until 1710, when the Statute of Anne came, because this particular guild, the London Stationers' Company, they weren't too happy about having their privileges revoked because they were very lucrative. There was a huge demand for books and printing. So publishers went to legislators, claiming to speak on behalf of the writers, or the creators of that time, and asking for extended monopoly powers. These monopoly powers, now, they didn't really benefit the writers, they benefited the publishers. But nevertheless, the legislators did listen to the publishers, that time to the copyright lobby of that time, and did re-establish copyright in the so-called Statute of Anne on April 10, 1710. Have we seen this pattern before? Where the copyright industry goes to legislators claiming to speak on behalf of creators, whereas creators really aren't involved. This was in 1710. And this is still the methods that is used. 1849, same story again, libraries, public libraries. The there was a debate about opening public libraries so that everybody could get access to books. The publishing industry said that, are you mad? You can't allow people to read books without paying for them. This was in a time when publishers actually tried to outlaw lending of books between private individuals because it was seen as stealing profit from the publishers. They said, are you out of your mind? You can't let anybody read books for free. If you do this, nobody will ever be able to make a living off of writing books ever again. Nobody will ever write a book again if you open a public library. However, the British Parliament considered the public's access to knowledge more important than this particular monopoly. And so the first public library opened in 1850. And as we know, no book has ever been written since ever again. Either that or all of this nothing will be created argument is still bogus. And they went on to try to outlaw every new distribution mechanism since. Public libraries, the play piano, the broadcast radio, tape recorder, photocopy, cassette recorder, video cassette recorder, and MP3 player. All of these would be the catastrophic end of culture as we know it. So, what does the Pirate Party say about copyright? We're saying that a major problem with copyright is that it's seen in isolation. It's sort of seen through a paper tube where civil servants try to see what do we need to do to safeguard copyright as it stands today. The issue needs to be politicized. And as a politician, I need to take a 10,000-foot view of the copyright problem. I need to ask myself, what is the cost of safeguarding copyright at today's level? And that question is not asked as long as the issue is not politicized. So the problem today is that if I send an email to anybody of you guys in here, that email may contain music. And if copyright is to be safeguarded at today's level, you can't find that without breaking the postal secret between me and you guys. You need to listen to all ones and zeros that leave my computer in order to find what is email and what is music in that email. And then again, what is copyrighted. So we're talking about that the same laws need to apply online and offline. The postal secret has been a cornerstone since wax sigils appeared a couple of 100 years ago. And it is a key to pretty much every distribution mechanism that we have. The postal service is, at least Sweden's, and I believe Denmark's too, largest distributor of narcotics. Still, nobody would hold them accountable for it. Yes, if you have a specific suspicion, you're free to open letters, but you're not free to open every letter and see if it contains something illicit. The right to anonymity, same thing there. Ever since letters were conceived, it's the writer that determines if and when you give away your identity. It's not up to a third party to always be able to know who's sending what. Messenger immunity, perhaps one of the most important ones. A mailman or a message carrier is never legally liable for the contents of a sealed message. This is called common carrier principle in the US. This is mere conduit here in the European Union. And it's under assault by the copyright industry, ferociously. They're talking about that internet service providers should have a responsibility. No, they shouldn't, and it's tantamount that they shouldn't. Because if they are given a responsibility, they will not dare transfer anything that hasn't been a priori approved by basically a very small selected elite of content management. Freedom to communicate, that I get to choose whom I talk with, and that's not regulated with a third party. When I try to go to the piratebay.org here, that's blocked, and I think that's very troubling. Right to privacy, that nobody gets to see what ones and zeros leave or come to my computer or are in my computer. This is again something, all of these are under assault by the copyright industry, because this is what's needed to safeguard copyright at today's level. The erosion or abolition, okay, I got out of line there. The erosion of abolition of vital civil liberties. Right to create or innovate without asking permission. Well, I'll get back to this later, but essentially, copyright has come to hinder innovation, not encourage it. And file sharing will never stop. Perhaps this is the most important part. Open platform mobile phones have just arrived. This is an Android phone, which I just happened to turn on by mistake. It's an open platform, meaning I can develop any software for it. It's got wide range Bluetooth, and I predicted a couple of years ago that one of the first applications to appear would be file sharing on this open platform, and that was also the case. That means I can press a button here and share all content in this phone with everybody in this room without anybody being able to trace it to my phone. And this technology is just developing on an exponential scale right now. This particular phone has 8 gigs of memory. That is as much as the average computer had in 1999 when Napster arrived. So file sharing is coming to a platform where it can't be centrally monitored. And we also see this behavior in school kids today, that they share large music collections with their mobile phones without any central point of control whatsoever. However, civil liberties are at stake. File sharing will always continue, but the fight against file sharing is threatening vital civil liberties, all of which I just enumerated here. And that's why we need to take a very strong stance against the copyright industry's unwillingness to bear their own weight in the market. We are essentially seeing a bunch of corporate dinosaurs who know that they are out of the market. They no longer provide any value to the end of the value chain, but insist on having themselves legislated a market. So what are we saying about copyright? We are saying that it needs to go back to being a commercial monopoly only. We are saying that it needs to be kicked out of honest people's bedrooms. We are saying that it should not apply at all to any non-commercial activity. That's the most important part. As if the instant we do that, we are not threatening civil liberties anymore. I'm probably running out of time, right?
Yes, you are. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm almost finished.
Thank you.
So on a functioning market, these industries are saying that you can't compete with free and that you can't compete by giving things away for free. Well, you can compete by giving things away for free. You should ask Metro, the newspaper. And if you think you can't compete with free, you should ask Volvic and Evian. They're doing pretty good. This is a political battle. It's not a market battle anymore. A couple of corporate interests are trying to legislate a place in the market at the expense of our civil liberties. And artists are creating despite copyright. When a teenager come to their parents and say, "Mom and Dad, I'm going to be a painter," their first reaction is not, "Oh, you're going to be so rich." Rather, they're troubled because they want their kids to grow up to be lawyers or doctors or something like that. This is not a way to make money. So, copyright or civil liberties? That is the question that I need to ask myself as a politician. Shelters or windmills? That was the initial question. And it comes from a Chinese proverb. In winds of change, some people build shelters and other people will build windmills. So, what do we want to build?
Absolutely.